Wonder Woman in Supply Chain, Opportunities and Challenges. And here we are, I invite the panel moderator, Ms. Rosie, CEO of Global Learning Solutions. And we have a beautiful line of speakers today. Let me start with Joyce John, Process Optimization Manager, Coca-Cola Beverages Botswana, and Azukaego, Director of Truss, Ugavi, and WANGECI GITATA-KIRIGA, Senior Consultant of KIJANI Group, Dr. Faith Mashele, Co-Founder, Makgarebe, and Chairperson of CIPS Gauteng Branch. So the floor is all yours, Ms. Rose, and yes, you can go ahead for the panel discussion right away.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen in the house. My name is Rose Sang. It is a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon to be discussing about women in supply chain. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our panel. I can see Dr. Faith right there. Can I please have the others put on their cameras? Thank you, WANGECI. Joyce?
Yes, I'm trying to put on my video, but it's not getting through. I don't know why.
Okay.
Thank
and
you.
we also have Azukaego. Are you with us this afternoon? Will she be joining us? Okay.
Okay, she's not in the participant list. Might be she'll join in some time.
Okay, when she does, please let me know so that then we can be able to engage with her. All right.
Yes.
Okay, so just to give context, you know, Wonder Women in supply chain, what an interesting topic. I was reading about the Gartner research, and women comprise 41% of the supply chain workforce in 2021. And traditionally, one overlooked and underutilized labor pool has been women. The industry has been a male-dominated field for decades, but the need for additional help today, combined with increased automation, taking many of the repetitive and physically taxing jobs out of the question. And this has put women in a better situation to start a career in supply chain. Research has already shown that diversity improves profitability and ability to innovate, which we hear from our teams and clients as we engage with them. And companies are also preparing for a future where humans and machines can work side by side. Having a more inclusive, diverse workforce allows them to be more agile, more creative, and better prepared. So not better topic today than to discuss about the Wonder Women in supply chain. And so I'll start off with you, WANGECI, perhaps very briefly. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and why it is that you're passionate about this particular topic.
Sure, Rosie. And I guess brevity is the key word here, because I could really go on about women in supply chains. Anyway, my background is in law and international trade. And I'm a consultant at KIJANI Group, and we provide consulting services, especially in the market systems development space. And I've worked as a board representative of the Fair Trade Advocacy Organization that's based in Brussels, that really does look at how can you make supply chains, and especially agricultural supply chains, work, especially for those who are on the producing end of it, where you're trying to balance the power between those who are producing the product and those who are consuming the product, right? There was a phrase that one of the voluntary standards used that was called fair trade, and they were calling it the power of the many, because the way that supply chains work, you know, you've got two masses. It's almost like an hourglass. Yeah, you've got all the consumers who are buying the product, if you want to think of that as the top end of the supply chain. And then you've got all the producers on the bottom end of that particular supply chain. And then you have very few players in the middle dominating almost all supply chains when it comes to commodities, whether we're talking about coffee or cocoa, or we're talking about cotton, or we're talking about flowers, or even gold, right? Or even fuel. you have very, very few players in the middle that tend to hold a lot of the power within supply chains. And so that's just in general. So you can imagine the level of marginalization that then takes place when it comes to women. If you've given us some really interesting and accurate statistics, slightly depressing, I must say. But that said, you still have you still are seeing that the world is pushing towards these SDGs with a focus on gender equality, but really just hanging on to what you've just said, that when businesses are more inclusive, when businesses have a higher level of parity, whether that parity is in pay or whether that parity is in the opportunities that are offered to women, those businesses tend to do better because women tend to invest not only in themselves, but also in their families and in their communities. I think it was the World Bank that was showing how you have better outcomes when you invest in women, because when you improve a woman's lot, she improves everybody around her, meaning that even the nation itself will be one step closer to getting to where they need to be. So yes, my bias as a woman is because I am a woman, but that is why I'm really passionate about women in supply chains, because I have seen firsthand the difference that they're able to make in their own communities when they're given the opportunities and the space to do so. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Invest in women, you invest in communities, higher profitability. All right, interesting. We'll pause there while I get Dr. Faith to introduce herself and just tell us a little bit about why she's passionate about women in supply chain. And are you a Wonder Woman in supply chain?
Joyce, ma'am, please, excuse me, ma'am, click on start video.
Good afternoon, Rosie. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. So a bit about myself. I am the chairperson of the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply in Gauteng. I also co-founded a civil society organization that is focused on women empowerment and inclusivity. So the topic and your opening statement spoke right to me and why I love what I'm doing. I also am involved in academic research. I supervise MBA students as well as business leadership or PhD students that are focused on procurement. So mine is just to say, as somebody who has walked the path as a practitioner and also now has seen the value and trying to get the accurate, I mean, you were referring to statistics, right? That is part of research. So my work really is bringing together what I have experienced in practice and also what I'm seeing as part of research and pulling it together and being part of these amazing panels where we're called Wonder Women in Supply Chain. But I also like what WANGECI, right? Yes, said, which is, you reminded me of a report that UN Women also released to say when women entrepreneurs, right, are appointed or are empowered, they tend to employ other women. So it tends to have a ripple effect of the economy of just inclusion and participation. So I am excited, and my passion for procurement is because I suppose this is the one thing that I do very well, that I have done for over a period of time. And like I said, for me is how do I get and match what I've seen in practice, pulling it together and being able to share the knowledge on platforms such as this one today.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Faith. It'll be interesting to hear a little bit more later about, what you're seeing, sort of being the chair of CPIS, to be able to see, what's coming out of it. Is it more females joining the profession? Is it not? How do we influence curriculum? So we'll be having a discussion around that. Joyce, I don't know why you're having trouble with your video, but the conversation must go on. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and I know you're working at Coca-Cola at the moment. Why are you passionate about this particular topic?
Good afternoon, everyone. My video is not going through. I don't know why, but I will go on anyway. My name is Joyce John. I'm the former procurement manager for Coca-Cola Beverages Botswana. I've recently joined Group Office as Procurement Optimization Manager, and I'm really privileged to lead Coca-Cola Procurement Excellence Team, to provide procurement support to all our different African countries within Coca-Cola family. So my main role is to ensure compliance on procurement ways of working, policies and procedures. And I've been in the procurement space for 14 years now, working for international companies, for example, SAB Miller, AB InBev, and currently I'm with Coca-Cola Beverages Africa. In terms of roles, I would say there's no position that I haven't gone through in the procurement space. I've worked at operational level, I've worked at managerial level, and I'm currently at procurement policy level. Yeah, that's it for now.
Okay, great, thank you. And we hope that you'll fix your camera very soon.
Yes,
Maybe to leave and then join back. It might be able to work. Yeah, okay. Yes. Now this name is a little difficult for me, but I will try. Azukaego. Did I pronounce your name properly?
Oh, you did a good job.
I tried. Hi. Okay. Do you have a shorter name for it, like Azu or something like that?
Azuka works. Azuka.
Okay. It's a bit of a mouthful. Okay. So we're just introducing ourselves, and you caught us at the tail end. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we can get into today's discussion?
Okay, so Azukaego Chukwuelue is the name. Sales and supply chain professional. Started my career in Pfizer. Later became Nimeth in Nigeria. Then Cadbury Kraft Mondelez over a 15-year period. And then lastly, Kimberly-Clark as supply chain director, a role which I stopped in September this year. And basically now I'm in supply chain consulting. I've seen the private sector, multinational part of it, and I want to go into the MSME space. So basically my experiences have been around commercial sales marketing, the whole trade gamut, route to market, sales and operations planning, the trade basically. And then from there, my love for supply chain started, because I realized that even if we have the discussions with the customers and do all the negotiations, it's important that we fulfill the orders and do it on time and in the right way. So that's when my love for supply chain began. So I went into the supply chain space, and it's been a very interesting experience. Going around planning, distribution, logistics, transportation, procurement, the whole gamut, and it's been an exciting one. So that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you, ladies, for the introduction. So let's get into the discussion now. I know, WANGECI, you were talking about you being in markets, and COVID-19 has seen innovation within the supply chain. I mean, you look at organizations like Twiga Foods, based here in Kenya, that have acted as a consolidator of agricultural produce, creating markets and perhaps a little bit of value addition. Just tell us a little bit about this, because you find that women are mostly within that informal sector. What has it meant for them insofar as streamlining that process? Talk to us a little bit about it.
Actually, it's been a really interesting space, especially with all the, I guess, changes that COVID has forced upon the supply chain, right? Because before that, everything was all about efficiency. Nobody was looking at duplication as something that could have been seen as a means of disaster preparedness. So you want to be as efficient as you possibly can, whether it's in the speed or in your selection of the market. But then now with COVID, you've realized that there's a need to diversify even that market, right? Whether you're looking at that market as a local market, a regional market, or an export market. Because a lot of, let's say a lot of farmers, whether they were small scale or they're larger ones that were really focused on the export market, they found themselves unable to actually even send this food out, especially in the very beginning of COVID, right? So you had all this quality produce, this huge investment that had been made, because unfortunately we still tend to export our best, yeah, and only keep what do you consider, you know, the thing that didn't meet that export standard is the one that you find being sold in the local market. And I think that COVID has taught us that we need to make that shift. That this, whether you're getting a Kenya shilling or whether you're getting a US dollar or whether you're getting a euro, the main thing is that you sell your product. And the further and the faster and the more diverse your market can be, then the better off and the more resilient your business is. And then we also saw, you know, a lot of this work moving or these streams moving online. And they were going online in a very interesting way, because you ended up having, you know, your local, well, I'll use the Kenyan example because I'm based here in Nairobi. You ended up having Jumia. Jumia is in very many different African markets, but I'll speak to the Kenyan experience. In Nairobi, we have this huge market. It's called Wakulima Market, and the nickname for it in Kenya is Marikiti. And during COVID, Jumia used to have vegetables and fruits that were being, or you could order on Jumia vegetables and fruits from this farmer's market, and they would be delivered to you via a motorcycle, right? We call them boda boda here. And so you found that that woman who is in that market stall in Marikiti has now gone online. And even the Central Bank of Kenya had done a lot of, you know, they did a lot of work around e-commerce. And they found that within Kenya, the rate of businesses that went online, and it not even necessarily in a very complicated way, whether it's just something like WhatsApp for business, or whether it's a combination of using your phone, using your WhatsApp, using mobile money. And then, you know, that is still e-commerce, right? And so the way that this was enabled, mobile telephony and this technology enabled small traders to get into some level of formalization, because they were using, you know, they were using means that had records, that had traceability. We saw a lot of that happening last year because of COVID. Yes, COVID is still with us, but now things have opened up a bit more. And we're also seeing even larger players continuing to do that. We are seeing that happening in all sorts of supply chains, and not just in the fruits and vegetables, but in all of these areas where deliveries have really truly grown. The other interesting thing that was a bit of a contradiction to what the central bank had found in their reporting was that the International Trade Center did a study that was looking at the growth or the use of digital platforms on the continent. And they looked at 6 different markets. And they found that businesses that were run by men increased their sales value by about 14%. And then businesses run by women decreased in their sales value by about the same percentage. But then if you think about it, it's because of all those other things that sit under the unpaid burden of care, right? When everything closed down, women were still the primary caregivers. They became the teachers, they became everything, right? And so obviously something had to give, and unfortunately for a lot of women, that was reflected in their incomes, and the fact that they were also in a lot of positions where not a lot of them had the luxury of quote unquote working from home. So COVID did come with certain opportunities. It made people think differently, do things differently, but it did also come with quite a number of challenges that where now women had even more to juggle than what they usually do. I hope that answers your question, Rosie.
It does, WANGECI, it does. And I want to follow that up with Azukaego. You know, Nigeria, 100 million people, COVID hits. What has that meant for supply chain in women, especially in the West African part of the world? Azukaego, are you with us? Yes, there you go. Yes.
Okay. So I had to change my location.
Okay.
Yeah, because I had guests downstairs. Okay, so interestingly, over 200 million people, 100 million of that, about 100 million of that women. What does it mean for the supply chain? I think that it speaks to more responsiveness. More responsiveness in the sense that today my mother, who is in her 70s, has an understanding of what the issues are, why she's not getting her supplies. You know, I tell people, and I say jokingly, I say, the pandemic has done something for us that we have not been able to do ourselves. It's made the supply chain more visible. You know, these are problems we've always had. It's nothing is new. The issues around shipment, clearing, distribution, planning has always been there. But what it's done is made it more visible today. So, for example, I am the voice out there who is calling on the women in supply chain, because the truth now is the complexity is calling for more responsiveness, and more responsiveness is calling for more people, you know, more people on the table, more people to come solve the problem. And, you know, ordinarily supply chain is a male-dominated role, correct? But the truth now is more hands are needed on deck, and the women are there and available. And therefore, we need to have representation, inclusivity, diversity. We need to have women on board who can do the job to also come do the job. I jokingly say to people, the supply chain is your kitchen. You plan what the family needs to eat. You then source for the produce. Some are wet produce, you put in the fridge. Some are dry, you store in different places. What you need is a basic understanding of the supply chain. Every other thing is teachable. The soft skills are now more critical than ever. Willingness to solve the problem, ability to work with people together, you know, an understanding of the data, ability to look at things end to end. Because the complexity is going to continue for some time. Even if the pandemic stops today, we need to ensure that we get back to stability, and this is going to take a while. And so we need more people on the table solving the problems. And that's why I keep calling out to the women in supply chain to come and let's have this diversity on the table, because solving these problems require diversity. And then another part of it that we need to consider is that the consumer is now more aware of what he wants. Sitting at home has made the consumer understand, this is what I need, this is what I will do without. And being able to pay for what I need makes it, hello?
Yes.
I read no audio.
We can hear you. We can hear you. Proceed. I think she's frozen there. Azukaego, can you hear us? Okay. All right. While we try and get her back online, Joyce, can you hear me? I can see you're saying no audio. Can you hear me, Joyce? Joyce, can you hear me? Okay. We'll try and fix that. But Dr. Faith, one of the key aspects that will play a critical role insofar as bringing women to the table is education. And, you know, being chair of CIPS and providing the necessary sort of capacity building initiatives. What are you seeing within that space? And what are the gaps that you see insofar as that competency is concerned that perhaps we need to begin thinking about and consciously building the capability within organizations?
Rosie, I would say from the data that we have and what we're seeing from our branch is that firstly, you asked about 4 questions in one. Let me try to break it down with the first one. So the patterns that we're seeing is in our branch, we have about a 60-40 split. So we have more women, which is a good thing, I suppose, that speaks to this topic to say, do we have more women in this space? So we're seeing that 60-40 split. But then again, if you go deeper into the analysis, you realize that women are not really necessarily represented at the senior roles, right? So at a senior level, there's still very much work that needs to be done in terms of capacitating women, in terms of making sure that we get more females in senior roles. I think this is something that we see across the board, where we see labor reports around parity, gender parity, inequality, whether there is really inclusivity in terms of how we hire women. So that's the first answer to your question. I think the second thing that you spoke about is what the gaps are. I would say that the gaps would be more the leadership space to say, maybe the question is, what makes women not to make the senior roles? Is it an issue of them not being qualified? And I would say the answer is no. I don't think that's the true answer, because I think we still need work that needs to be done in terms of society being open to women as leaders. This is something that in terms of paper, it looks very good to say as society, as a culture. So let's talk about, in fact, maybe let's take it to organizations. The culture would, on one hand, would say, we are an organization that is very much supportive of having more women. But then when one goes into organizations, the culture is very different in terms of, do we really want to? It's one thing to hire women, but then the next question is, how open are we to retaining that woman? How open are we to understanding what are the challenges? So I like what I keep, I suppose, quoting what WANGECI said in the beginning, to say, with the pandemic, we know that many women had to step into the role of teaching, caretaking. How inclusive and how open are organizations to supporting women, and understanding that what I have to deal with before I switch on that camera, I probably had to feed, had to bathe, had to do so many other things that my male counterpart will just come on and switch on the camera and continue the day. So I think if we take it to a societal level, there's still so many other issues that we need to deal with in terms of making sure that we provide the adequate support. But then maybe to your last part around what are some of the initiatives, I'll speak about an initiative that CIPS Africa introduced earlier in the year, which I was a part of, where so I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, and the initiative that they had was, how do we mentor and create that bridge that where we're able to hold and handhold, right, the members who have the aspiration to get to higher roles. So one of the programs that was put in place, and like I said, I participated in, is just that mentoring. I think mentorship will continue for a very large part to be one of the key pillars in terms of capacitating and making sure that we get the right representation and we get the right support for women. I hope I've answered all. How many answers were there? Questions were there?
There were 3, and you did a great job.
Okay, cool.
You did a fantastic job. Thank you for that. And so
right.
Joyce, she's oh, there you go. Now I can see you.
Yes, I'm back.
Ah, fantastic.
Okay.
And you're back with the video. So that's great.
Yes.
So just following on from what Dr. Faith said, she was talking about deliberate effort to move women into leadership positions or to create space for women in supply chain within organizations. Are there any particular initiatives that Coca-Cola is doing to get women to the table to discuss matters supply chain and hold those positions?
Thank you very much, Rose. Coca-Cola Beverages Africa is highly committed to diversity and inclusion. You know, this is how we win and achieve our commercial objectives. It is not something we do once we have reached our commercial objectives. Women empowerment is done in different ways, such as talent development and training, and it forms part of the organizational culture and strategy. And we continuously receive enormous executive support for women in ensuring that there is work-life balance. So if I may to give you an example, I've been promoted to this very senior position within procurement, supporting different countries within African continent while working from home. So the company has equipped me with all the resources you can think of to enable me to work from home. And our approach to diversity and inclusion starts with executive ownership and commitment. As Coca-Cola Beverages Africa, we clearly articulate our intent to drive inclusion of women in key roles. To date, we are at 32%, and we aim to get to 50% across the whole business, not just in supply chain. Over and above that, Coca-Cola is consistently going the extra mile outside its four walls by providing support to women-owned businesses within its value chain, and we are ensuring that they are empowered through training, mentorship, access to finance and assets. And by the way, our procurement spend with women-owned enterprises has increased from 4% in 2017 to 30% in 2021. And this includes women-owned truck drivers and distributors. Thank you very much. Are you still there, Rose?
Okay, thank you, Joyce. So interesting to note that you're looking at supporting women-owned businesses.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
On mute.
We can hear you. We can hear you, Rosie.
Yeah, okay. So it's interesting to note that, you're supporting women-led businesses, doing business with Coca-Cola. And Azukaego, I want to turn to you. We've had about mentoring, we've had about supporting women and, giving them the space. Is there anything interesting that you're doing in your organization to rise women into leadership positions, especially in supply chain? Any interesting initiatives?
Okay, I'm gonna stay off video. I think that when I stay off video, when I'm on video, it's different. Okay. So interestingly, at Kimberly-Clark, before I started work at Kimberly-Clark, it was interesting to know that that's the first organization that had more women in supply chain in the EMEA region than I had ever seen. So it was quite interesting. And the interesting thing is that there were a lot of women in supply chain, and then there were initiatives to get women into manufacturing, clear initiatives to actually look for women who were in the manufacturing space and invite them to be part of the Kimberly-Clark manufacturing team. So there was a deliberate effort, and I think it was, one of the speakers already was Joyce, making it a deliberate effort. I'm currently in the consulting space. I'm currently looking for women procurement directors. I had a conversation this week and another conversation last week. What is the conversation? I reached out to young women who I felt could take on the role of procurement directors, highly recommended by their bosses and people who work with them. And when I had a conversation with them, part of the things that came up was, oh, I'm comfortable in my state. I don't want any disruption. Oh, this might impact my family arrangements today. Oh, I don't know. There's this whole imposter syndrome thing coming up. I don't know whether I'm good enough for the job. I do my job, I know my onions, but moving higher, it's a lot of exposure. So when I hear those kind of conversations, I agree that organizations then need to deliberately, have these conversations within to put women on the table. Organizations need to have some sort of inclusive lab or inclusion lab where women sit with other business leaders, male and female, and discuss the peculiar challenges for women to take a seat at the table. One of the things I'm doing in the private space today is to build the capabilities that women feel they are lacking. And what are these capabilities? The comfort with numbers, the comfort with having leadership conversations, the comfort with financials, in a simulated environment, such that they solve business problems in a simulated environment using a tech-enabled platform, such that women begin to get more comfortable in the spaces that they are aspiring to. Why is this important? It's important because there's already a gap. There's already fewer women in the leadership space. Get into the spaces to start having those conversations helps them to be more comfortable with the spaces they aspire to. It's a deliberate effort on the part of organizations, on the part of we as women ourselves, and on the part of groups that should make this happen. Hello, Rosie.
Yes, I could hear you. You were fainting off a little bit, but yes, I heard that you're doing a deliberate effort to ensure that women grow into the supply chain roles. Dr. Faith, we've seen a lot of governments, and I know you've worked for government entities, putting a deliberate effort to support women businesses. I know, places like Kenya, where we have the 30% that speaks to businesses going, much of what government is spending should go to women, youth, as well as those with disabilities. And we still find that even with the 30%, we still don't have adequate uptake of that. What do you think is the reason, and what else could be done to then ensure that these percentages are taken up by women and legit sort of women businesses? What are some of the thoughts that you have?
So I hear you talking about the 30%, and personally, I don't think 30% is enough. And I'm saying personally, that stems from, if you look at the population, I've just given you the statistics, for instance, from our branch, where I said we have a 60-40 split. And in most countries, really, you find that women do exceed men. So the question becomes, is 30% enough? It's a question, right? But then to your point, Rosie, you're saying that there is an uptake of those legit women businesses. I think that more needs to be done. And if the question is, what is the more that needs to be done? We need to have those efforts. For instance, I think in 2019, when UN Women launched their first gender responsive procurement conference, I spoke at that conference as one of their experts. And in that space, there are a lot of women organizations. There are a lot of women organizations that are keen to take up this 30% that is being referred to. But then again, the missing piece perhaps is their capacitation. The missing piece tends to also be the women don't even talk to each other. At times, right, where I'm not even aware what I can, by just connecting with you, Rosie, what is it that I can benefit, or what can I learn, or what is the next, I don't know, can you hear me? There's feedback on my side.
Yes, Dr. Faith, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. All right,
Yeah.
That's fine. Okay. So I was saying that by virtue of us being on this panel together today, Rosie, I believe that if we were to extend this conversation, there could be a lot of things that I could learn from you, or there could be some context that you can get from me. And this is the kind of conversation that we had back then, where I said, when we get to conferences, do we even take time to say, understand what the next person is doing? And from that space, I'm just giving an example about, this is like 2019, where I said, I attended a conference, women businesses in the room who could have, just by virtue of saying, this is what I do, let me understand what you're doing. We need to be able to create that kind of system. So if you were to ask me, what is the one unconventional thing that we need to do, is how do we get women to be communicating and talking to each other. Now, on a personal capacity, Rosie, I then, hence I said right in the beginning that I co-founded a civil society organization that is focused on women empowerment and inclusivity. I then also realized that there is an opportunity where we can create platforms where women, one, can connect with each other. So what our platform does is that the main offering that we give is to change the narrative around women, the narrative around businesses. So what we try to do on a weekly basis, we find a woman from our community. So this organization that I'm part of is in my hometown, right in South Africa, Mahikeng. So what we do is we find ordinary women who are doing great things. We tell these stories. It looks like a simple thing, but by virtue of us sharing the story about a Rosie who comes from, and again, we're also cognizant of representation. So if I see a story about a Rosie who looks like me, a Rosie who's gone and is now facilitating a panel at this kind of summit, that says to me as I'm sitting and as somebody who has aspirations to be in the space, how do I approach Rosie? Maybe it is also possible for me. So by sharing these stories, we are creating a platform where women are able to connect with each other. Women can then go up and say, okay, I am aware of this project. Or if I'm sitting here thinking, or hearing somebody who says, I want to understand, do you know somebody who's in construction? I'm able to always know them. I could know somebody who knows someone. So the times of having the textbook approaches to solving these problems, I think they're past. But then what we need to do now is to understand, one, the spaces that we operate in, and two, come up with solutions, Rosie, that are very relevant to the current time, solutions that are very context-driven, where we understand, and we don't have this general blanket statements of what needs to be done, let's have capacity programs. But if I say, for instance, and again, much of it is also part of what I studied, and I have these recommendations in my PhD as well, is to say, when we say capacity building programs are what should be put in place, have we gone to understand whether what works in agriculture can go and work in the airlines? What works in the ICT space, can it be used for pharmaceuticals? So for me is coming back to everything I'm saying is coming back to, can we create platforms where women are able to connect with each other and also come up with solutions that are very context specific and very relevant to what we're trying to solve for.
Excellent, ladies. I'm told our time is up, but before we go, I'll give each of you 30 seconds to just speak to that lady and encourage her and perhaps give a word of mentorship to her. So 30 seconds each, and then we can hand it back to Dinesh for purposes of closing this session. So I'll start off with you, WANGECI. What would you say to that CEO or that lady who wants to bring up women in supply chain? 30 seconds.
I would say that every story matters. Just what Dr. Faith has said, and that goes to the one who is aspiring and to the one who is already sitting on that seat, that every story matters and that it's important to share that story, because you sharing that story inspires the next person to do better and to know that it can be done.
Fantastic. Every story matters, and that could be a source of inspiration. Excellent. Azukaego, what would you say? 30 seconds for you. Azukaego, can you hear us?
I hear you. I was trying very hard to start my video. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you. Proceed.
Okay. So I think for me, it's the understanding that it's two parts. The understanding on the part of women that we are needed out there, and so we should come out to meet the need, and the understanding on the part of organizations that at the end of the day, diversity is key, inclusivity is key, and you make the best decisions.
Okay. I heard about capacity building is key and inclusivity is key. Thank you, Azukaego. Joyce, what would you say?
Hi again. You know, being a woman myself, we have these natural characteristics that we are born with. And most of the time we leverage soft skills such as emotional intelligence, and we lead with empathy, which brings a conducive environment within the workplace. That's it from me.
Okay, so using our soft skills to be able to be effective within the workplace, things like emotional intelligence. Thank you very much. Dr. Faith, you have the last word.
I would say, beautiful woman, understand your power, stand in your power. You have the power to change your story. We have the power to change the narrative. We have the power to use our influence. And again, in our own gentleness, in our heels, in our smiles, we can do better. I would say, be the change that you want to see in the world.
Excellent.
you.
You couldn't have said it better. Be the change that you want to see in this world. Thank you so much, all. This has been Rose Sang, your host for this afternoon session. I'll hand it back to Dinesh and Shan to take it over from here. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Rosie, and all the beautiful speakers of the panel. It was just eminent, just the word eminent, I would say. I wanted to say a few more words about these women. These women are not just employees or business women, but they've identified the need to bring many more women along with them in their journey of achieving economic emancipation. They have just taken up the role of mentors, coaches for women such as themselves and girls who are aspiring for careers in this industry. Thank you very much, and a special thanks to Rosie. That was an eminent topic. Thank you very much.